China has been kind of making their position clear since before the tariffs were actually imposed, when Trump was blaming them for fentanyl and using that as a pretext for the tariffs that were to come. Chinese embassy tweeted out, if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. And here's another one. The U.S. needs to realize that China is not a mirror image of the hegemonic U.S. The U.S. should stop viewing China-U.S. relations with an outdated Cold War mentality. The U.S. must no longer seek to contain or go after China in the name of strategic competition. Whatever kind of war it is, once again, a tariff war, a trade war, a Cold War, or a hot war, they should not be fought and cannot be won. So they made their position pretty clear at the beginning of March. Trump's not taking that seriously. Yesterday, China issued retaliatory tariffs of 34% on top of their already record-setting tariffs, non-monetary tariffs, illegal subsidization of companies. It's not illegal to subsidize companies. Just like protesting Tesla is not illegal. Just like boycotting Tesla is not illegal. They like to say things are illegal for people who got votes of the Libertarian Party. Isn't that funny? It's not very libertarian. They want to impose state control on everything.
We give corn subsidy. We subsidize all kinds of farming.
We subsidize all kinds of stuff. We covered yesterday how part of the
vaccine production.
One of the ironic results of this is that factories that were being built because they were subsidized under the Build Back Better bill are now canceling because it's too expensive to build the factory.
Right.
Against the U.S. by issuing manipulation, despite my warning that any country that retaliates against the U.S. by issuing additional tariffs above and beyond their already existing long-term tariff abuse of our nation will be immediately met with new and substantially higher tariffs over and above those initially set. Therefore, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, 2025, which is today, the United States will impose additional tariffs on China of 50% effective April 9th. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. Negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. You know, that fills me with confidence when he does these sign-offs like he's dictating it to his secretary.
Okay, circle back. We'll talk tomorrow.
Circle back. This was a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry who responded to this escalation. 1 second. There we go. There is no winner in trade war and tariff war, and protectionism leads nowhere. We do not provoke trouble, nor are we intimidated by it. Pressuring and threatening are not the right way in dealing with China. China will take necessary measures to firmly safeguard its own legitimate rights and interests. If the U.S. side disregards the interests of the two countries and the international community and insists on initiating a tariff war or a trade war, China will fight till the end. Okay. So an intangible that it just seems like they're too narcissistic to calculate is unpredictable consequences of messing with people's national pride this way, particularly the Chinese, who have a lot of ugly history with Western domination that a lot of their geopolitical posture is built around. I just had a great, so this is Donald Trump today. I just had a great call with the acting president of South Korea. We talked about their tremendous and unsustainable surplus tariff shipbuilding, large scale purchase of U.S. LNG, natural gas, their joint venture in an Alaska pipeline, and payment for the big time military protection we provide to South Korea. They began these military payments during my first term, billions of dollars. But sleepy Joe Biden, for reasons unknown, terminated the deal. That was a shocker to all. In any event, we have the confines and probability of a great deal for both countries. Their top team, I'll say it like that when he goes all caps, their top team is on a plane heading for the U.S., and things are looking good. We are likewise dealing with many other countries, all of whom want to make a deal with the United States. Like with South Korea, we are bringing up other subjects that are not covered by trade and tariffs, like why they got rid of the naked chicks in Playboy. No, that's not it. And getting them negotiated also. One stop shopping is a beautiful and efficient process. China also wants to make a deal badly. Yeah, they sound like that, right? But they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. Now, in his last thing, he said they wouldn't take their call. It will happen. God bless the USA. Okay. So now Besant, he basically said this on Tucker. He's going with the theory we're too big to fail, and the Chinese are going to have to come to the table. They have no choice. So here's a little bit of that.
Has maximum negotiating leverage right here, right now. And I think it would be a mistake for anyone to think otherwise. And as I said, many of our trading partners, they have queued up and they have kept their cool. They have not escalated, and they will get priority in the queue. I think it was a big mistake, this Chinese escalation, because they're playing with a pair of twos. Traditionally, if you look at the history of the trade negotiations, we are the deficit country. So what do we lose by the Chinese raising tariffs on us? We export 1/5 to them of what they export to us. So that is a losing hand for them.
Okay. Now, of course, part of this system that, again, I want to do more of a deep dive. It's kind of beyond the scope of this, but part of what they do with that money that they get from those exports is they plow that money into U.S. treasuries, which is a big part of the reason that America has been able to sustain a level of wealth that is not at all justified by its production. You ever wonder, hey, how is America this rich country if we have no factories and our main export is McDonald's? How do we maintain this? Because a lot of that deficit money comes back to us in the form of investment. And yes, there are a lot of downsides to that. Is a big part of what's inflated all of these assets, including real estate, house prices. A lot of money comes back into that. But that is an element of this that he's pretending does not exist. Like it's a triangle trade where this money does come back to the United States, and that money's going to be cut off. Overall, if you look at what Doge is doing, that's part of why they're doing, because that money is not going to be coming back in the forms of investment in treasuries to support the budget that we have, but they want to cut taxes for themselves. They want to cut taxes for rich people. I mean, that in the end shows you what their priorities are here. They want to reset the American system, but the working class is not the aim of it. Their own class is the aim of it, and preserving the power and privilege of that class, which they see is going to erode over time if they don't reset the system in some way. We'll get into that more on Thursday, but moving along. So a little more detail. China is not backing down, as you saw. Beijing has vowed to fight to the end hours after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to nearly double the tariffs on China. That could leave most Chinese imports facing a staggering 104% tax, a sharp escalation between the two sides. Smartphones, computers, lithium ion batteries, toys, and video game consoles make up the bulk of Chinese exports to the US. But there are so many other things from screws to boilers. Quote, it would be a mistake to think that China will back off and remove tariffs unilaterally, says Alfredo Montufar Helu, a senior advisor to the China Center at the Conference Board think tank. Quote, not only would it make China look weak, but it would also give leverage to the U.S. to ask for more. We've now reached an impasse that will likely lead to long-term economic pain. China had responded to the first round of Trump tariffs with tit-for-tat levies on certain U.S. imports, export controls on rare metals, and an anti-monopoly investigation into U.S. firms, including Google. This time, too, it has announced retaliatory tariffs, but it also appears to be bracing for pain with stronger measures. It has allowed its currency, the yuan, to weaken, which makes Chinese exports more attractive. And state-linked enterprises have been buying up stocks in what appears to be a move to stabilize the market. Quote, what we are seeing is a game of who can bear more pain. We've stopped talking about any sense of gain. Mary Lovely, a U.S.-China trade expert at the Peterson Institute in Washington, D.C., told the BBC's NewsHour program. Despite its slowing economy, China may very well be willing to endure the pain to avoid capitulating to what they believe is U.S. aggression, she added. Shaken by a prolonged property market crisis and rising unemployment, Chinese people are just not spending enough. Indebted local governments have also been struggling to increase investments or expand the social safety net. Some experts believe the U.S. and China may engage in private talks. Trump is yet to speak to Xi since returning to the White House, although Beijing has repeatedly signaled its willingness to talk. But others are less hopeful. Quote, I think the U.S. is overplaying its hand, Deborah Elms, head of trade policy at the Hinrich Foundation in Singapore, says. She is skeptical of Trump's belief that the U.S. market is so lucrative that China or any country will eventually bend. Now, Chinese do have a little bit of a sense of humor about what's going on. This is going around, but Adam tweeted this out. The Chinese are trolling America with memes on American reindustrialization. The music. Yes, the music is pretty funny. So let's take a look at that.
We just got to say before we start, it just this is AI.
This is AI.
I know YouTube wants us to be very clear about that. So this is an AI rendering of a would-be American manufacturing revival.
Not only is China out competing us, not only are they out manufacturing us, not only are they out diplomacying us, now they're out trolling us.
Yes, they're out memeing us.
They're out memeing us. Wow.
Yeah.
That is a sad day when the Americans are getting out trolled, particularly when MAGA is getting out trolled, because trolling is kind of their thing. It's a whole political movement built around feeling good through trolling.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, exactly.
So what if I have to duct tape my broken arm together?
Yeah.
I'm owning the libs.
Yeah, that really hits where it hurts. Yes.
Yeah, and you were saying, I didn't see that, but that they were going to slap an 80% tariff on rare earth minerals tomorrow. this is what they seem not to be factoring in all of these negotiations. They're going with a madman theory, it seems like, that you're going to scare the shit out of everybody and force them to the table. China, again, has a very dark history with Western domination that they are not accounting for. And these are a tough people. This is what they're pointing out with that video. I mean, it's true. This is a country full of people who are out of shape, overweight, have never done that kind of work before because of the industrialization. It's not like, you mentioned 1999 was probably too late, but you might have been able to do it in 1999 because you would have had people who had recently done work like that. You would have
Right,
had a
right.
large population of people who were used to working in these kinds of factories doing that kind of piecework labor and that kind of thing. Where are these people going to come from? Like that video, it's meant in a humorous vein, but it hits a valid point. And clearly, Vicent and Lutnick recognize that too. That's why they're talking about robots and AI factories. They know you can't get an American workforce to replace that Asian workforce that does this now.
Yeah. Breaking More Perfect Union. White House press secretary says 104% tariffs on China take effect tonight at midnight. So yeah, this is certainly getting more severe as the minutes click by.
And the averages are now red.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I can't imagine living in another country and even viewing this country, our country, as like a real nation. Like when I look at China, that's a nation. Russia, that's a
Right.
nation. Yemen, that's a nation. They have a rally, 1 million people show up.
Right.
The Chinese, obviously, with these big events and organized functions. Even Russia, Putin has a wartime rally, and tens of thousands of people show up. Whether you agree with them, don't agree with them, like them, don't like them, those are, it goes back to Walter Sobchak. Say what you want about the ethos, about national tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos. I can't imagine living in another one of these countries and looking at America as if it really stands for something
Right.
from the top through the bottom. My guess is that people around the world view America as essentially a mafia state. The people are essentially irrelevant. It's just the hub of all of these nefarious interests where the worst elements of politics and finance and weapons manufacturing sort of converge, and this cabal of just the worst people on earth bully the rest of the world around. That to me is what America is. And, that ultimately is a house of cards when you stack it up against these other countries that are, for whatever faults they may have, at the end of the day, they are nations that stand for something. That's why we haven't won a war since World War II, because we just don't stand for anything anymore. And we assume when we say, well, yeah, we're going to outlast China. Trump, when he had Netanyahu with him, says, well, they're not going to want to not do business with us anymore.
Right.
That's just not an option. They'll cave. They assume that every country lives according to the same imperatives that our elites do, which is, well, it's all about the end of the day and the end of the week and ultimately the end of the quarter. It's all about putting up good numbers at the end of the quarter. China's not that place. They are perfectly willing and able to sustain periods of hardship, much more than we do. This country has a nervous breakdown when the power goes out. Okay. Right. Like, it's just like you're comparing apples and oranges. And in a very chauvinistic sense, Trump and his whole team is just making all of the wrong presumptions that other countries around the world will react to this bullying the way we would react were they to bully us. Well, that assumes that they have the same priorities that we do and that they are operating on the same timetable as we do. That's not the case. That is largely why they are our adversaries to begin with, because they view the world differently than we do. Yeah.
Yes. And it was interesting what he said in what I read at the beginning from March, where they said, don't assume that China is the mirror of U.S. hegemony. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
A world, I have always said, a world that China leads is likely to be more peaceful because they're not interested in colonizing the world in the way that Western powers historically have. They've never shown much interest outside of what they would consider their regional sphere of influence. To the extent that people always ask, China invented all of these things and had gunpowder before the rest of the world. Why didn't they wind up dominating the world? Because they decided at a certain point, under a particular emperor, you know what, these people are barbarians. Let's just not even trade with them. Let's just fall back on ourselves. So they missed those technological innovations because they became completely cut off from seeing what was happening and interacting with it. But that speaks to the psychological makeup of the culture. Like they don't really have. Big part of the reason for the Opium War was the trade imbalance, actually, because China didn't want to import anything from the Europeans. They weren't interested in it. They felt it was inferior to their culture. The only thing they could really force on them was opium. It's the only thing that, because it's an addictive drug, so they could get them to buy it. Assuming that the Chinese people, as you say, are like the American people, spoiled and so anxious that they're just going to cave in as soon as they don't get their trade. That's very foolish, man. It's very foolish. I think that they will probably be more likely to take this as an opportunity to really shift the balance of power in the world. It's the saying, when your enemy is making a mistake, get out of their way.
Please clap.